Have you noticed that it's hotter this summer? You only have to persist for 5,000 years. Feel Cool World Meteorological Organization data shows that in 2024, the average temperature of the Earth will be 1.6 degrees Celsius, first breaking through the pre-industrial 1.5 degrees Celsius for the next year boundary. This is the hottest time in 125,000 years. January 2025 1.75 degrees Celsius warming continues to break records. Paris landmark Eiffel Tower. The hot air is tilted 20 centimeters to the west. However, the latest research shows that we're still in an ice age, according to the definition of geology. Our world today, it is in a warm period of military construction. However, the study found that we may be slipping the abyss of the next ice age. More worrying is the position of the Earth relative to the Sun remarkably similar nearly 16,000 years ago at that time. It is the end of the military period that has lasted for tens of thousands of years. Giant ice caps. The end of the last push forward. Will history repeat itself ruthlessly? It's not a fantasy. Scientists have warned, maybe in the next 5,000 years. Relentless glacier, it could swallow vast continents again. Other researchers have given more a tight schedule. They believe that the consequences of global warming or climate change, perhaps in the next 2 or 3 centuries, trigger a new ice age. Atmospheric warming could lead to a surge in precipitation, especially at high latitudes. This huge influx of fresh water will be severely diluted from the tropics. The Gulf Stream flows to the poles. This powerful, the ocean current is sinking in the North Atlantic, eventually flow back to the tropics, completing a cycle of approximately 2,500 years. Once the Gulf Stream is weakened or even stopped, the consequences would be catastrophic. The heating ducts in this ocean were cut off. Heat transfer from the tropics will come to an abrupt end. There are research models that show we're adding just 1% a year of fresh water into the atmosphere, enough for a century. They shut down the Gulf Stream. That's when glaciers will no longer be confined to the poles. They will begin their relentless southward expansion. London, New York will eventually be covered in ice. Is this the future we cannot escape? Human civilization, is it moving towards another frozen world? If the answer is yes, what was the trigger that triggered him? Although the future is full of uncertainties, but we can look back in the distant past, looking for clues. For example, we know that in the past 2 million years, Earth has experienced periods of extreme cold. At the height of the worst ice age, huge ice caps extend all the way to altitude, only 100 meters away. Middle-aged unmelted snowline, a full 1,400 meters lower than today. The sea level was 120 meters lower than it is now, exposed today. Hidden 500 meters deep, the mid-latitude continental lie, shelf beneath the sea. Most of continental Europe, it's not forest cover, but the desolate Taiwan and ice fields to the ground. The boundaries of the forests retreat into North Africa and the Middle East. You might ask, there were no thermometers. How do we know all this? The answer is engraved in the rock formations of the Earth. The existence of the Riverside era, well established by geological evidence, mid-19th century, when Swiss scientist Louis Agassiz first proposed the coast, the concept of the River Age. He was ridiculed by his colleagues. But then geologists discovered it's the irrefutable imprint left by Chuan. When glaciers move, rocks carried by the bottom will carve deep scratches on bedrock. Their immense power, it can also float huge rocks upright, transported from a distant source, stacked up into hills known as weapon cages, or scattered across the plain, even unstable distances in the depths of the ocean. These bizarre boulders scattered all over the place. It's ironclad evidence that glaciers once ravaged. Combined with the study of continental drift, geologists have successfully located remains of an ancient ice age, and by measuring the extent to which the ice sheet pushes towards the equator, assessed their strength. The oldest known ice age started about 5 million years ago, possibly triggered by earlier glacial activity, named the pre-cold 5 seasons ice age, and the most violent ice age ended about 10,500 years ago. It is called 5 wood ice. Paint 5 wood ice paint may be the coldest. The global average temperature is about 10% lower than it is now, 10 degrees centigrade. Other famous ice paints also include Salary's Matilda and Reese ice paint. There was a huge difference between these ice ages, whether its duration or coldness. For example, the Reese Ice Age affected Europe for nearly 500,000 years. The fifth glacial period was relatively short. It lasted only about 65,000 years. The interior of the Ice Age is not static, interspersed with the warmer Jianbing section during the cold and long glaciers retreat period. Therefore, early classification of ice paint, named after European rivers, if co-financing is no longer applicable. Instead, it places more emphasis on the concept of ice steps, in which glaciers advance and retreat in a specific area. Another key piece of evidence for the existence of an ice age, ice cores drilled from Antarctica and Greenland. Scientists analyze bubbles trapped in ice cores. In particular, the proportion of oxycotonin in it, oxygen-18 and oxygen-16, reconstructed dating back to climate history 400,000 years ago. In cold times, oxygen-18 levels in seawater will increase relatively. This is because lighter oxygen pomegranates evaporate more easily. After the evaporated water vapor forms an ice sheet, the proportion of oxygen-18 rich water in the ocean is even higher. Marine organisms such as foraminifera, when building a calcium carbonate shell, will absorb these oxygen atoms. When they die, shell, when it sinks to the bottom of the sea and becomes a fossil in sediments, the proportion of oxycuprimycin is recorded by analyzing these fossils. Scientists can deduce that the average temperature in ancient times clearly revealed the pulse of the Earth oscillating between warm and cold. Humans themselves have left the mark of the Ice Age. Lascaux and Chauvet caves, France and Spain. Prehistoric frescoes in the caves of Altamira depicts a man with long hair, isocarpic behemoth. Even today, as Siberian permafrost continues to melt, more frozen secrets are being revealed. For example, by the end of August 2020, save unusually intact carcass of a long-haired rhino reappear in the world. Traces of glaciers, much older than we have ever known. The oldest known glacial activity, probably 2.40 billion to 2.30 billion years ago. Repair Ice Age. This is likely to be the earliest photosynthetic organisms on Earth, cyanobacteria, and the blooms of oil slick plants. They absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, attenuates the greenhouse effect, and releases oxygen. Oxygen forms the ozone layer in the upper atmosphere, blocking more solar radiation. These factors work together, cooled the Earth dramatically. The polar ice caps rapidly formed and spread. The main evidence of this ancient glacier, just kept in Canada, near Lake Huron on the border with the United States, and a series of groups known as the Gonflint Group weight of banded ferrous rock strata. These are sediments carried by meltwater from glaciers. Lots of water in summer, coarse sediment in winter. The amount of water is small. Sediments formed by or stopping alternating deposition present a clear and regular text through these formations. Scientists can even calculate with precision the end of the last ice age in Sweden, exactly 18 to 900 years ago. Cold period in the history of the Earth, recurring from the Paleozoic to the present day. However, the mother of all ice ages, undoubtedly, it was Snowball Earth 700 million to 600 million years ago. At the time of the event, the Earth was almost completely frozen, lasted for about 10 million years. The land area was very small at that time. They're concentrated around the equator, causing massive evaporation of seawater. When the rain finally falls, he removed huge amounts of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Greenhouse collapse. The polar ice caps are expanding like crazy. Although the heat inside the Earth prevents the ocean from freezing completely, but global average temperatures could be as low as minus 50 degrees centigrade. The ice is up to a kilometer thick at the poles and spread towards the equator. In this extreme environment, early life on Earth faced a severe test of extinction. The Snowball Earth hypothesis is not science fiction. He was there to explain that geologists around the world include anomalies found in rocks near the equator, proposed example, in sediments that were once oceans, we found glacial debris and iron-rich deposits. This requires atmospheric almost no oxygen can form. And here's what's even scarier. Such a vast ice sheet, it's an accelerator of a vicious cycle. More ice means higher reflectivity of landmarks, anti-signal rate, reflecting more sunlight back into space, resulting in lower temperatures. The Earth seems to be trapped in an eternal frozen hell. Lives are at stake. However, in those dark ages, like algae, primitive life like cyanobacteria and plankton, undersea volcanoes survived tenaciously. Under the protection of hot springs, it's these volcanoes ultimately become the savior of the Earth during snowball. Earth, due to the fact that the surface is covered with ice, liquid water cannot evaporate to form rain. Volcanoes continue to erupt. Released greenhouse gases, such as carbon dioxide and methane, cannot be absorbed and removed by rainwater. You can only keep getting tired in the atmosphere. This process is extremely long. It took 40 to 30 million years. The final concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, soaring 1,000 times. The powerful greenhouse effect is finally crushing the ice sheet. Global ice is starting to melt. Atmospheric water, vapor regression, absorbs heat from the sun and the Earth's interior. The Earth went from an average of minus 50 degrees. It rapidly rises to 50 degrees. Above zero, completed a stunning reversal. The continents are elegant, reorganizing the face of the Earth. May have prevented such an extreme ice age. Do it again. But the central question still hangs over our heads. That huge and complex problem. When will the next great ice age come? We are currently enjoying relatively mild ice-building climate. But how long? Can this comfort period last? To answer this question, we must understand thoroughly the true mechanism by which the ice age began. In the early 20th century, Serbian mathematician Milutin Milankovic takes a crucial step. He put forward a revolutionary theory. Think of the past million years of ice. Periodic cycles of period and glacial period can be explained by changes in the parameters of the Earth's orbit. There are no perfect orbits in the universe. The motion of the Earth has been subtly changing. Shape of the Earth's orbit around the Sun, eccentricity changes. Now he's getting closer to the prototype. Eccentricity about 0.0167 make the Earth at perihelion and aphelion distance from the Sun, about 5 million kilometers, but over a period of about 9,000 years, the attractive forces of other planets, the orbital eccentricity will increase to a maximum of about 0.58, causes the distance difference between perihelion and aphelion expanded to a staggering 17 million kilometers, second axis of rotation of the Earth inclination angle relative to the orbital plane. The yellow-red intersection is also changing. It is currently 23.4 degrees, but over a cycle of about 41,000 years, it will swing between 22.5 degrees and 24.5 degrees. Third, the direction of the Earth's rotation axis. It is also moving slowly. It's called a split fork. It's like a spinning gyro. Approximately every 2,800 years complete a 360-degree cycle. The Earth at this time was in different seasons. The angle towards the Sun changes over time. These astronomical cycles combine. It has a profound impact on different seasons. The amount of solar energy received at different latitudes. For example, when the yellow-red angle increases, seasonal difference. Cold winters and hot summers will be more extreme. Increased eccentricity. This affects the total amount of solar radiation received throughout the year. When these changes are combined in some way, the solar energy received in the northern hemisphere during the summer, when significantly reduced, it may trigger the arrival of ice paint, ice sheet expansion, sea level decline. On the contrary, when the northern hemisphere receives more energy in summer, glacier retreat occurs during warm, ice-building periods, sea level rise. The key to understanding the alternation between glacial and glacial periods, it seems to be hidden. These seemingly small temperature changes to know the ice age global average temperature, only 4 to 6 degrees Celsius lower than the peak ice age analysis of climate data and geological records. powerful support Milankovitch cycle and Earth, the connection between climate fluctuations, then the answer seems simple. If the only driving force of the Ice Age cycle, the astronomical factor proposed by Milankovitch and its cycle is about every 40,000 years repeat, we seem to be able to predict the next severe cold. Unfortunately, reality is much more complicated than that. When it is difficult to accurately quantify non-astronomical factors, forecasting becomes cloudy. The scientific community generally believes that the formation of ice sheets is also strongly dependent on composition of the atmosphere greenhouse gases, such as carbon dioxide. The cold snap of a methane volcanic eruption, changes in gas concentration can significantly enhance or reduce the weak greenhouse effect affects global temperature. And here's the thing, the slow motion of tectonic plates determine the position of the continent. If the continent's drift place, large tracts of land at high latitudes near the North Pole or Antarctic Circle, provides the ideal ruthlessness for the accumulation of ice and snow. Once the massive ice caps formed, its high reaction rate will bring more sunlight reflected back into space, intensifying global cooling, forming a positive feedback loop. Finally, Earth's climate can also be influenced by random events, severe disturbance. For example, the global impact of large asteroid impacts and the winter effect. The complex interplay of all these factors make accurate predictions. Next great ice age. When did it become nearly impossible? To appreciate the difficulty of such predictions, just look back over the last few centuries. Climate change in Europe. The 9th to 13th centuries are known as the medieval warm period. The climate is stable and mild. The average temperature is even higher than it is now, 2 degrees centigrade. Norway successfully grows grapes. Viking land reclamation in Greenland, growing wheat for 300 years. In comparison, under modern technology, Greenland wheat cultivation lasted only a year. Snow County in the Alps rises by 200 to 300 meters. Increase in arable land. Europe's population has quadrupled, but it didn't last. From the 14th century to the 19th century, Europe has entered a period of miniaturization. Glaciers are advancing strongly across Europe. Scholars identify 2 of the coldest stages. It's Breigi-Siaoki, about 1450, and Mondegi-Little 7, about 1645-1715. The cold and changeable climate caused the crops to fail. Famine and pestilence raged. The deadliest was the Black Death in the mid-14th century. Between 1310 and 1322, harsh winters and cold summers continue. The winter of 1317 to 1318 was particularly dreadful. Cologne even snowed on June 30. After a brief recovery in the late 14th century, cold weather persisted throughout the 15th century. Period begins in 1408 and 1409. Harsh winter. It was one of the coldest periods in 1,000 years. Another cold peak appeared between 1530 and 1560. But the summer of 1540 was incredibly hot, one of Europe's hottest summers in 40,000 years. The temperature in Switzerland is 5 degrees Celsius higher than average. The drought caused the land to become violent. Some people even die of heat stroke. On the streets, then cold again reigned in Europe. Until the early 19th century. In 1658, Korea froze the Denmark Strait. The Swedish army was able to march on foot. The invasion of Denmark included cavalry and artillery. The winter of 1708 to 1709 was unusually cold, compatible with 1408 to 1409 January, 1709 polar-like cold temperatures recorded in many parts of Europe. Paris, as low as -23 degrees Celsius. Berlin, -29 degrees Celsius. Venice, -17. 5 degrees Celsius. Venice, Leak Lake and Lake Garda are both frozen. The coldest phase occurred between 1783 and 1816, mainly caused by intense volcanic activity. That led to 1816 being called the Year of Nothing. Since the 1850s, the temperature started to rise slowly, although at the end of the 19th century, Dalton's solar minimum, and slightly stagnant. Another significant cooling happened between 1940 and 1970. especially the severe winter of 1939 to 47 since the 1970s and 1980s. Global warming trend resumes form the modern warm period we are currently in. So, in a nutshell, understanding the pulse of Earth's climate is extremely difficult. Recall that this was before industrialization. Human activity, in the age of not enough to affect the climate, also fluctuating wildly. We are concerned about the exact cause of the current period of global warming. It is wise to maintain an open and prudent attitude. With the development of technology has also brought new theories. Perhaps with the solar system, the location of the Milky Way in interstellar space, it could be related. To get a clearer answer, time may be the best teacher. Despite this, when will the next military period on Earth come? None will be a concern for our children and grandchildren. The fateful question of future generations.